Hi, boys and girls. Today we're going to continue with Who is Stealing the 12 Days of Christmas by Martha Freeman. Chapter 19. We turned down the cookies and dashed out the door. We were so speedy that we arrived on Bub's front porch, only 2 steps behind Al. Luau was already there. "Afternoon, kids," Al said. "Coming for soup too? Today's minestrone. Minestrone means big soup in Italian. Bub makes the biggest yet." "We're detecting," Yasmin sounded very serious. "We want to ask you some questions." "Me?" Al said, and at that moment Bub's door opened. "Hail, hail," said Bub. "Right this way. Soup turned out real well. Got coffee too." Al whispered to us, "Stay away from the coffee. It sits on the stove all day, just like the soup. For coffee, it's deadly." I guess Yasmin was so excited about detecting, she forgot about Bub's cooties and getting in trouble. She followed Al into Bub's house, no hesitation. I followed her. The front door opened on a hallway. The picnic cooler Bub's niece had brought was sitting there. To the right was the living room, which had a dining table. Beyond the table was a kitchen. Luau went right by the living room and up the hallway. Then he did the bump thing against the closed door on the left. Mr. Kitty," Bub shook his head. "You stay out of there." He picked Luau up and carried him into the living room and dropped him into the recliner by the TV. "Looks like Humphrey Bogart again," he said. Al hung his coat on the back of a chair and sat down at the dining table. He cleared newspapers away to make space for himself. Yasmin and I hung back. Now that we were in, what were we supposed to do? "Sit yourselves down, kids," Bub said from the kitchen. "Did you know that I'm a very important person?" Al said. "These kids have questions for me, detective questions." "Do tell." Bub came out with a bowl of soup, a spoon, and a paper towel. He set them on the table in front of Al. "2 more coming up." Yasmin and I argued, but Bub ignored us. Soon there were 3 bowls of soup on the table, along with 3 paper towel napkins. What else could we do? We sat down. "The Queen of England won't be dining with us today," Bub said, "so there's no need to stand on ceremony. Eat up." The soup smelled good, and I had missed lunch. "Good," I said between slurps. In fact, so good, I forgot all about detecting. But not Yasmin. She ate 1 dainty bite and laid her spoon down. She pulled the cardboard ducky bottom out of the pocket and held it up for Al to see. "Do you recognize this?" she asked him. Yasmin must have been watching movies like the one Luau was looking at now. I think she expected Al to break down and confess he was the bird thief, and maybe the mouse thief too, but he didn't. He took the cardboard from her and said, "A piece of cutout from one of my boxes. Where'd you get it?" Yasmin looked crushed. "You don't know?" she said. Al pushed his bowl away. "Superb, as always," he told Bub. "Got time for coffee?" Bub asked him. Al was already standing and putting his coat back on. "Oh no," he said, "not this week. I got a delivery right here for Sophie and Byron. Man, my sister buys them a lot of toys. Then I go downtown for Mrs. Miggins. After that, over the mountain to Bellburg for a pickup, all before 3. "Before you go," I said, "could I ask you something?" Al smiled. "Sure, if you make it snappy." "Who, besides you, would have your boxes?" "All kinds of people," he said. "The ones I just mentioned, for starters. The Socorro kids, Mrs. Miggins. Probably everybody I deliver to has boxes kicking around. Why? Is that cardboard some kind of a clue to something?" "Some kind, but not the good kind, I guess," Yasmin said. Al said he was sorry he couldn't help, and he headed for the door. Halfway across the room, he nodded at the picture window. "Looky here, who's coming up the walk," he said to Bub. "Guess the authorities have caught up with you at last." Bub looked. It was only a matter of time. He held out his wrists like he was ready for handcuffs. "I'll go quietly." I heard footsteps on the door, then Al opened the front door. "Hey, officer," he said. "I got a scoop, but the culprit says to come right in." You think they're being serious or joking around? Chapter 20. Yasmin and I looked at each other. What was going on? Was Bub really going to be arrested? Did this mean he was the thief, and Officer Crikels had solved the mystery already? That he had beaten Yasmin and me? Officer Crikels walked into the living room. He was tall and had a kind face, but now he looked stern. I expected him to pull out his handcuffs, but instead he went over to the recliner and petted Luau. "This one's yours, right, Alex? Has he got a license?" "Oh, now you need a license to watch a movie, do you?" Bub asked. "What's the world coming to?" I meant," Officer Crikels started to say. "I know what you meant," Bub said. "Want some soup?" Officer Crikels smiled and took a seat next to me. "Why else would I be here?" "You mean you're not going to arrest Bub?" Yasmin asked. Officer Crikels laughed. That coffee of his, it's a crime, all right. Aw, what do cops know about coffee, Bub said. Anyhow, your soup makes up for it, Officer Crikels went on. Thanks very much. Bub set a bowl of coffee in front of him. Officer Crikels wasted no time eating it. Meanwhile, I was trying to figure out what to do next. We would have to tell him about our evidence now. We didn't have any excuse not to. Yasmin elbowed me, and I knew she was thinking the same thing. Officer Crikels, I began. We have something to tell you. I'm all ears, he said. So I told him everything we knew, even the parts I hadn't told Mom yet. I told him about chasing the shape, finding the mice, the milkmaids, the treasure map, the ducky's bottom. When I got to the last part, Yasmin handed him the piece of cardboard. He looked at it, but he didn't study it the way I thought he should have. Finally, I was done talking, and he said, well, you kids have done some fine detective work, I must say. At the same time, he scratched his head. What? Yasmin asked. It's a little far-fetched, don't you think? Treasure maps, mice hidden inside birds. But we've got the evidence, I said. We can show you the map. It's at my house. Officer Crikels nodded and smiled. I'm sure you do, kids. The thing is, I pretty much got it figured out on my own. Just as your mom thought, Alex. It's just a kid prank. What? I said. How do you know? Yasmin asked. Well, it is official police business, Officer Crikels said, but I guess I can tell you it should be all wrapped up very neat this afternoon. You see, the last lost bird has been found. Mr. Stone's calling bird, Yasmin said. Where? Officer Crikels nodded. In the bird bath. What bird bath? Yasmin asked. But of course I already knew. There is only a single bird bath on our street. It's one of Luau's favorite hangouts, and it belongs to the Sikoras. Chapter 21. Before Officer Crikels left, he explained how he knew about the lost bird. It was a tip, he said, and guess what? It came from my favorite blabbermouth friend, Russell. I bet he'd been positively thrilled to phone the police about it. Officer Crikels pulled his notebook from his pocket and studied what was written on it. Our dispatcher, Angie Price, took this down, he said. The informant, your friend Russell, called us shortly after noon today. It seems his brother Graham, age 5, was over at the Sikora residence this morning. It was Graham who observed the incriminating evidence, the calling bird, in the bird bath. That's weird, I said. Graham and Byron Sikora are the same age, but usually they don't get along at all. Officer Crikels shrugged. I'm only telling you what was told to me, he said. Anyhow, I'm now on my way to the Sikoras to interview those kids. Sounds like one of them must be the perpetrator, the thief, I mean. I understand young Sophie has a bit of a reputation. But what about our evidence, Yasmin said. The mega menagerie burglary must be connected to the birds missing from the 12-day display. Alex found those mice in my yard. That's too big of a coincidence. Officer Crikels gave us one of those exasperating looks that grown-ups are always giving kids. I've spent many a long year in the law enforcement game, he said, and one thing I know is this. Coincidences happen. Can we come with you to interview Sophie and Byron, Yasmin asked. Officer Crikels shook his head. Official police business, kids. What if it got ugly? I can't put the law-abiding public, which in this case is you, at risk. I was having a hard time imagining what kind of ugly Officer Crikels anticipated. Did he think Sophie and Byron might pull out their squirt guns? But he was already standing up to leave. There was nothing we could say. When Officer Crikels was gone, Bub surprised me. Fred Crikels is a kind man and a good friend, he said, but no one's ever accused him of being a brain. Personally, I thought you kids made a lot of sense. Thanks, I said. Yasmin looked sad, but then she smiled. Anyway, Mr. Stone will be happy, and there's another good thing, too. We keep trying to share our evidence with the police. They keep not caring, so our detecting continues. Here's what I think, Alex. I think the time has come to write a list of suspects. You can only do that if you have a list of suspects, Bub said. Do you? Yeah, do we? I echoed. Yasmin shrugged. We will as soon as we make one. Bub got up from the table and rooted around in the drawer. I got a pencil and paper right here, he said. I've seen my share of mysteries on TV. Maybe I can help. But before he found what he wanted, there were more footsteps outside and the front door opened again. Wow, I said. This place is as busy as a restaurant. Bub smiled. Credit our low, low prices. The latest visitor turned out to be Jo, Bub's niece. As she fluttered around, removing her coat and mittens, she reminded me of a sparrow, small and quick. I guess I had birds on the brain. Sorry I'm late, she said. I had one last paper to turn in. It was about the Polish Christmas traditions. Isn't that appropriate? Humph, Bub said. Bubs and my family came from Poland a long time ago, Jo explained. Now that the paper's done, I can concentrate on the real thing. Christmas for Bub. Bub twirled one finger in the air. Oh, joy. Joe ignored him. So, shall we get right to it? I've got a lot to do before tomorrow, and besides, I don't want to lose my nerve. She nodded at the cooler. Bub sighed. If you say so, he said. Kids, I'm sorry. I guess that list of suspects will have to wait. My niece and I have some business. I felt embarrassed. Was there something he didn't want us to see? Just let me get luau, I said. Good idea, Bub said. No telling what he'd do if he saw what Joe and I are up to. We were barely out the door when Yasmin made an announcement. I have it all figured out. You do, I said. She nodded. Mm-hmm. I know what's in the bathtub. I know who stole the birds. I know everything. Meow, Luau said in my ear, and it meant I know something too, in case you were wondering. So what else is new, I thought. Everybody's smarter than me, even my own cat. Okay, I said, let's pretend I believe you. What? And that's where we're going to end today, and we'll find out some more tomorrow. Thanks for listening.